This is a very serious situation. Great Britain is now saying they're going to send more ships down to the Straits of Hormuz to make sure that Iran does not do anything untoward. And before you all get caught up about, oh yes, we've got to, you know, how would you feel here in the United States of America? How would you feel if a foreign government like China had their warships tooling around the Gulf of Mexico to make sure that we did what China wanted us to do? How would you feel about that? Would you be comfortable with that? Would you say, oh yes, it's right and just and moral? I don't think so. Or if you're listening to this show from Europe, as I know a lot of you are, how would you feel if Chinese or Russian warships were basically going up and down the English Channel and waving guns all over and saying, you'd better run your economy to suit us? Because that's exactly what we're talking about here. The United States and now Europe, and the so-called allies, are talking about shutting down Iran over weapons of mass destruction that don't actually exist. The same lie they told us about Iraq. Iran is understandably upset, as we would be if Chinese warships were in the Gulf of Mexico threatening us. And the U.S. and EU are trying to take the attitude of Iran has no right to complain when we put, you know, warships and battle groups off their coastline and threaten them. Because, you know, it is Iran's oil. And if they decide that they're not going to let any more of it go out to anybody in retaliation for a threat against their sovereignty, they are within their rights. It's their land, their oil, their coastline. The U.S. and EU are the aggressors. They are intruding into territories not their own. And as I said, before you get all gung-ho to say, yes, let's have another war, before you fall for the same lie twice in a row, you know, just imagine how you would react if Chinese or Russian warships were rattling their sabers and bearing their guns and polishing their torpedoes down there in the Gulf of Mexico. Would you be comfortable with it? Would you be happy with it? Would you want your government to say, hey, go away? You have no business here threatening us when we have done nothing? Go back and look at your history. Iran's only crime is they freed themselves of the American puppet ruler, the Shah, in 1979. And since then, they haven't attacked or invaded anybody. They fought a war of defense against Iraq that was initiated by the United States of America that says, by golly, you will never free yourself from our puppet rulers. How dare you kick out the Shah? We're going to re-invade you, and we will give you a new puppet ruler. That didn't work out too well. Same thing they're doing in Libya. They go in, they get rid of Gaddafi and say, here's a brand new puppet government. Now the Libyan people have kicked that puppet government out, and the U.S. is going to say, by golly, you don't free yourself of the puppet governments we give you. We're going to go back in, and we're going to give you what for. And that's what's going on. And now they're trying to do it to Iran. The United States can't stand it when other countries kick out their puppet rulers. The U.S. overthrew the democratically elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953. And from 1953 to 1979, they enjoyed really cheap oil. Until the Iranian people said, you know, we've had it with this puppet ruler. And they kicked out the Shah, and they said, we're going to set up the country to run the way we want to. That's what democracy is. We'll pick our own rulers. We'll set our own lifestyle. We'll decide how we want to, what our religion's going to be. We make up our own rules as we go along. That's what democracy is all about. And the U.S. ever since has said, heck no, they have to be forced to accept the American way of life. And they tried to do it with the Iran-Iraq war, which was started by Iraq at U.S. instigation. The U.S. was secretly funding Iraq's weapons development. Remember the Gerald Bull supergun? The U.S. funded that covertly. And that didn't work out. Now they're trying to start another war with Iran, to go back in and basically impose another puppet ruler on people who don't want one. And you need to look around right now here at the United States of America at how Israel controls everything you see. Your politicians, your president, your senators, your congressmen, your TV sets, your newspapers. How does it feel to be an occupied nation, where you cannot run your own candidates for office? You have to pick from one that's already approved by that foreign government. That's what it feels like to be living under occupation. And that is why all these other countries hate the United States of America. It's got nothing to do with our freedoms. It has to do with the fact with a government that is addicted to screwing around with other people's countries. There is no terrorist threat against the United States. You could stop terrorism in a heartbeat. Just stop screwing around with other people's countries, and the terrorists will go home, if there are any real ones. I don't think there are. I think every terrorist out there is a phony and a fake, designed to create the justification for wars and conquest and oppression. Would it have made sense for George Washington and Thomas Jefferson to run around the schoolhouses in the American colonies killing kids to get rid of Britain? Of course it wouldn't. It's nonsense. That's why I know terrorism is it's a theater piece. It's all fakes. We know here in the United States the so-called American Al-Qaeda are all phonies. Adam Gadon's real name is Adam Perlman. He comes from one of the families that helped found the ADL. Yusuf al-Khattab, who used to run the Revolution Muslim website out of Brooklyn. His real name is Joseph Cohen. Amzi al-Amrika, the Muslim who terrorized South Park. His real name is Zachary Chesser. Do you get it? It's all a fake. It's a fraud. It's wag the dog. It's a hoax. It's lies. Because any time a ruler wants to start a war, they have to lie their people into it. All war is based in deception. Sun Tzu. Truth is the first casualty of war. Senator Hiram Johnson. We know governments lie to their people. It is a constant throughout history, whether it's Ramses II lying to the Egyptians about defeating the Hittites, or Napoleon lying to the French people about whipping the Egyptians, or Lyndon Johnson lying about torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, or President McKinley lying about Spanish mines in Havana Harbor, or Roosevelt lying about Pearl Harbor being a surprise attack when he worked to goad Japan into it for a year ahead of time. Wars are always started with lies, and they're lying to you again. And you've got to call all your friends and family and relatives, and you've got to say, look, what they're telling you about Iran is exactly the same thing they said about Iraq. And if you don't stand up, you're going to see a lot of your friends and neighbors' kids die for the benefit of a foreign government. If we do not choose to fight against these oppressors now, we will soon have no choice but to fight for them from now on. When the Project for the New American Century was putting out its policy documents about the new American militant superpower, they were literally talking a century of warfare. They were talking about starting a war that would not be over in our own lifetimes. This thing has gotten completely out of hand, and it's going to end badly because the United States is going to be destroyed. They can't win a conventional world war. And it is insanity. It is suicidal for them to be continuing on this course. And the only reason they're doing so is Israel pays them a lot of money and blackmails the rest. If you don't go out and whoop on Iran, we'll tell the world who really did 9/11, and it'll be worse for you than it is for us. If you were on an ocean liner, like the one that just got sunk, you know, where they've arrested the captain because he ran it onto the sandbar. If you were on an ocean liner and you saw the captain driving it towards an iceberg, would you not grab the wheel and give it a spin to try and save the ship and everybody on it? Well, we're on the ship of state right now. Barack Obama's going to get up in the Congress and he's going to plot the course the ship is on, and it's headed into disaster. And if the captain isn't smart enough or responsible enough to avert that disaster, to turn the wheel and avoid tragedy, then somebody has to take the wheel from him. Or we're all going to die. If the U.S. invades Iran and Russia and China come in on the other side, this is going to escalate until it goes nuclear. And then we're talking extinction-level event. And I know it sounds kind of fantastical. And I'm getting a lot of email from people saying, oh, come on, it couldn't possibly. Well, over the last 18 years, I've made a lot of prognostications. And I've made a few mistakes. But overall, I've got a good batting average for knowing what the money junkies are thinking and just how far they're willing to go. And I'm telling you right now that the people who are calling the shots here would gladly see 200 million Americans die as long as it guaranteed the surviving 100 million would be their obedient slaves for all time to come. That's exactly where we are. All of history is a fight between those who think people should be left alone and those money junkies who think that all of humanity should be yoked to serve their greed. And right now, the yokers, the enslavers, are winning because you believe it's the way the world is supposed to be. You believe that bankers are supposed to rule everything. Just like the black slaves in the antebellum South believed white plantation owners were supposed to control them. Or the medieval serfs of Europe believed that God had appointed the kings to rule over them. It's all bluff and bluster. It's all the Wizard of Oz. It's all the man behind the curtain pulling the levers. And as long as you allow your beliefs to control how you think, you will be their slaves. So it's time to cry freedom. It's time to lose the chains made of beliefs. It's time to stand up and realize that compound interest is not a legitimate means of governing and ruling the world. And on that thought, we're going to head on off here. We'll be back tomorrow on the Jeff Rense Radio Network. Until then, stay safe, stay well, stay angry, support Ron Paul, support the Occupy movement, and aloha, America.